When we think about data and evidence as a foundational component of collaborative response, it's really helping us to address the question of who should we be talking about? What area of focus are we trying to determine successes and areas of improvement? And then also being able to determine, are the supports that we're putting in place being successful? However, sometimes when the data and evidence is not being utilized as effectively as possible, here's what we'll typically see when it's not having that impact that we'd like to have as part of our collaborative response. The first is when there's a mismatch between the assessment and its purpose. We often see this when schools are trying to utilize a tool that's meant to be diagnostic in nature and using it as a screen, and then really feeling pressured with how long it's taking them to gather that information. Or when we're trying to progress monitoring with something that's not really intended to be a progress monitoring tool. So we really have to think about what is the purpose of the assessment, and does the tool that we're utilizing match? When I sometimes hear school teams say, well, we utilized this tool as a screen, but it didn't give us all the information we needed to act upon. Again, that's an indication of understanding the purpose of a screen. The purpose of a screen is to just indicate who should we likely be paying attention to and general trends. It's not intended to give us that deep dive of information that's going to inform all of the instructional next steps. The second is when we assess simply to get a number or a letter, which then is used for reporting or analyzing as a team. We know that if we are looking at, let's say, a numeracy assessment and we get a score of 7 out of 10, well, that doesn't necessarily tell me in what areas that we're struggling in, what are the specific topics or questions that we're struggling. We need to go deeper than that number in a way that allows us to really inform the response that we need to be taking. The third is when we see that the data is not effectively organized for analysis. We sometimes see this when we watch teams engaging in data and they have raw data in front of them, individual student data, stacks and stacks of papers and individual student responses, but we haven't given consideration on how we could consolidate that. What type of student cohorts do we want to consolidate together? And then most importantly, color coding that information so that it becomes really, really easy to utilize when planning out next responses and engaging in analysis. And then that really lends into the fourth thing that we see when it's really not having the impact that we want. And that is when when that data and evidence is not being used to inform conversations. When it's not flagging which students we should be paying attention to, when it's not making its way, we've done these assessments and screens over here, but it's not making its way into our collaborative structures and processes, the conversations we're having as a result. In time, again, you want to see those to be able to inform conversations within each one of our layered structures and processes for collaboration. So ideally, we would like to see those universal screens being used to identify students to discuss and then highlight key issues that then are going to drive the instructional practice conversations, particularly in the collaborative team meeting, and that then the results are being used to inform what's our next step, what's our responses, even whether it's response from an entire student cohort that we engage in through our collaborative planning practices, or the supports for individual students. And also in time then, that data and evidence being able to, as mentioned off the start, informing us, are the supports having success? Are we seeing the growth as a result of the responses that we are putting in place for our students and our overall school? So really like for you to continue to reflect and think about, how do we most effectively collect, organize, and then utilize the data and evidence that we are gathering to inform our responses.